Never go to the farm, Catherine. Promise me. Those words, spoken with intensity, were among the few demands my husband Joshua ever made during our 24 years of marriage. I respected his wishes, even when curiosity gnawed at me during those rare moments he mentioned his Canadian childhood on a property he'd left behind. But now, Joshua was gone, claimed by a heart attack no one, not even me, had seen coming. At 52, I was a widow with a daughter and a hollow space where certainty used to live. "Mrs. Mitchell," said Joshua's attorney, Mr. Winters, pulling me back. The wood-paneled office smelled like lemon oil and old files. Rain pin-tapped the Baltimore window, a gray smear reflected in the brass desk lamp. Mr. Winters steepled his fingers, studying me the way doctors study x-rays. "I appreciate you coming," he said. "There's a clause in Joshua's will that requires a personal explanation." My stomach tightened. I had survived casseroles, condolence cards, and the long silence of an empty bed. I wasn't ready for surprises. He slid a thick envelope across the desk. My name looked careful on the front, written in Joshua's blocky print, the edges creased from handling. "I can read it here," I said, though my hands had already started to shake. Winters nodded and leaned back as I broke the wax seal. Inside lay a single sheet, heavy stationery I recognized from our hall desk, and a smaller square of paper folded around something metallic. Joshua's handwriting marched across the page, precise, restrained, almost apologetic. He called me Kathy, the name he saved for mornings and mercy. He wrote that if I chose to ignore his request about the farm, I should at least go prepared. The square paper unfolded to reveal a tarnished brass key. "There's more," Winters said gently. He handed me a photocopy of a property record from Ontario, Joshua's childhood farm listed under a family trust that still bore his name. Attached was a map sketched in pencil, a straight gravel lane from the road, a barn, a windbreak of birches, and, behind the farmhouse, a rectangle labeled with 2 words, "Family Cemetery." My mouth went dry. Joshua had forbidden me from visiting a place where his kin were buried. "Why?" Winters cleared his throat. "He asked me to tell you that whatever you find there, he wanted you to own it." In the hallway afterward, I dialed our daughter, Lila. She let it ring out, then texted, "At work. What now?" I stared at the key in my palm, its teeth worn smooth, the cold imprint settling into my skin. I typed back, "Your father left instructions about the farm." Her bubbles appeared, then vanished. Finally, "Of course he did." Another secret. The elevator doors opened with a sigh, and I stepped into the lobby's echo. I wanted to call her stubborn, unfair, still 23 and sharpening grief into a weapon. Instead, I wrote, "Dinner tonight? We need to talk. Please." We met at a diner on York Road where the coffee was brutal and the waitresses called everyone honey. Lila arrived in her scrubs, hair jammed into a messy bun, eyes rimmed in sleepless red. She didn't hug me. "What's the latest?" she asked, sliding into the booth. I told her about the clause, the map, the cemetery. She stared past me at the pie case. "He kept you in the dark, Mom. He kept me there too." The word Mom landed like a small mercy. "I think we should go," I said. "I think answers might quiet the ghosts." She laughed, brittle. "Or wake them up." We split meatloaf because that's what Joshua would have ordered. And grief, strange creature that it is, likes rituals. I told Lila I'd drive north at week's end. She insisted on coming, out of anger or protection, I couldn't tell. Back home, I placed the key on Joshua's nightstand. The indentation from his wedding band still marked the wood, a pale circle like a lingering moon. I slept poorly, hounded by dreams of birches scratched against black windows. Somewhere, Joshua's voice said again, "Promise me." I woke sweating, promise caught in my throat. Before sunrise, I pulled a banker's box from the closet and started sorting. Death strips a house to inventory. Jackets that still hold a shape. Receipts for years we thought were ordinary. The stubborn paper trail of a life. I found a photograph I'd never seen. 2 boys in wool coats stood beside a fence. The taller one had Joshua's mouth. The smaller boy clutched a toy truck, smiling like he trusted the world. On the back, in a woman's looping hand, 1981, Barry and Josh by the birches. I traced the names, feeling something shift under my ribs. Slowly, I called Winters again. Did Joshua ever mention a brother? A pause moved across the line like weather. Only briefly, he said. The family experienced a tragedy. I'm not at liberty to elaborate. At liberty, I repeated, tasting the cold of it. Joshua was my liberty. After we hung up, I searched our files for passports, birth certificates, anything that might say more than the man I'd known. The house answered with dust. I pressed the photograph into my wallet, grabbed the map, and, before doubt rallied, booked 2 seats on a flight to Buffalo, the airport with options. On Friday, Lila met me at the gate with a backpack and a face set like a verdict. We didn't talk much until the layover when she finally asked, "Why did you never push him?" I swallowed. Because he gave me everything else. She considered that, then nodded once, not convinced, not rejecting it either. We rented a car on the New York side and drove over the Peace Bridge, the river flashing steel and slate beneath us. Crossing that line felt like stepping through a photograph. Same air, new frame. Lila drove. I kept the key in my palm. The highway thinned into 2-lane blacktop that rolled past cornfields and scrub woods. Ontario spread out wide and quiet, farmhouses tucked back from the road, silos standing like sentinels. Lila drove with both hands tight on the wheel, her jaw set, her silence heavier than the gray sky above. I unfolded Joshua's map in my lap, the creases worn soft, a straight line from the county road to the farmhouse, then the barn, then the rectangle he had labeled family cemetery. His handwriting slanted just a little, as if he had rushed this one note. Like even in death, he hesitated. "Turn left here," I said, pointing to a gravel lane almost swallowed by weeds. The mailbox leaned, its paint flaked away. No name, no welcome. Lila slowed, then stopped altogether. "Mom, are we really doing this?" Her voice cracked on really, and for a moment she was 10 again, scared of thunderstorms. I wanted to reassure her, but the truth rose like bile. "We don't have a choice," I said. "Your father brought us here." She pressed the gas, the tires crunching over stone, the trees closing in overhead. A hawk wheeled above us, sharp against the white sky. The farmhouse came into view slowly, as if it had been waiting. 2 stories of peeling clapboard leaned tiredly against the horizon, windows boarded in some places, shattered in others. The barn behind it slouched like an old drunk. Grass had grown knee-high around both, dotted with yellow weeds. The place smelled of damp wood and something faintly metallic, like rust. We parked near the porch. The steps sagged, the railing gone. Lila shut the engine off and sat gripping the wheel, refusing to look at me. "What if we find something we don't want to?" she whispered. I didn't answer because the answer was already inside both of us. We climbed the steps. The brass key in my pocket warmed against my leg. The front door lock accepted it with a reluctant click. The smell inside hit first. Stale, heavy with mildew and dust. The entryway was shadowed, wallpaper curling like old parchment, a staircase rising steeply with missing banisters. The air felt thick, a house holding its breath. I flicked the light switch out of instinct. Nothing. Lila pulled out her phone flashlight. Its small glow cut through webs and dust motes, revealing shapes of furniture draped in sheets. We moved room to room. The kitchen held a rusted stove and broken dishes piled in the sink. The parlor was empty except for a collapsed sofa and a warped piano missing half its keys. But the silence, that was the strangest part. Even abandoned houses carry a murmur, the sound of settling. This house seemed to listen. Upstairs, most doors stuck, swollen by damp. In the smallest bedroom, I found what felt like a shrine to childhood. A toy truck, a stack of school books with names scrawled in margins, a quilt folded neatly on the bed. The dust here was thinner, disturbed. "Look," Lila said, shining her light on a framed photo half hidden under the quilt. It was the same image I had found at home, Joshua and the smaller boy, but this one had a crack through the glass. The taller boy's face fractured. I turned it over. No writing, only a brown stain on the cardboard back. My heart picked up speed. Lila crossed her arms, hugging herself. "This doesn't feel right," she muttered. She was right. The house held sorrow like a sponge. I pocketed the photo. "Let's check the back," I said, though every nerve screamed to leave. We circled the farmhouse and spotted the gate. A rusted iron arch marked the entrance, the words Mitchell Cemetery welded across the top. The bars sagged inward, a chain looped through them. Behind the gate, birch trees rose white and silent, their trunks like bones. The graves beyond leaned uneven, some toppled, others swallowed by weeds. It wasn't large, maybe 30 stones, but the presence of it pressed against my chest. The chain rattled when I touched it. Locked. "This is it," I whispered. Lila shook her head. "Dad wanted us away from here for a reason." Her words carried weight, but so did the key in my pocket. Not the brass house key. This one smaller, iron, hidden in the folded note Joshua left. I tried it in the chain's padlock. It resisted, then clicked open with a sound too loud for the quiet woods. Lila stepped back. "Mom, don't!" I pushed the gate. It screeched and gave way. The ground smelled of damp earth and moss. We entered together, though every step deepened the air's chill. Names etched into stone stared back. Mitchell, 1903. Mitchell, 1927. Generations carved into rock, but one grave was different. Newer. Unmarked. Lila crouched, brushing dirt from its base. "This isn't decades old," she said. "This looks fresh." The soil looked disturbed, a darker color than the rest, as if someone had turned it recently. I felt my knees weaken. The back of my neck prickled. "But Dad's not buried here," she whispered, her voice trembling. We both turned at the sound then. A crunch of gravel behind us. A figure leaned against the gate, watching. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, face weathered by years outdoors. He wore a flannel shirt and work boots caked with mud. His eyes found mine, sharp and knowing. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He smiled without warmth. "The one who remembers what your husband tried to forget." The wind moved through the birches, and for the first time, I realized how far from home we truly were. The man's voice cut through the quiet like a knife. "Your husband should have burned this place to the ground," he said, his tone low, steady, as if rehearsed. Lila straightened, her hands balled into fists at her sides. "You knew my dad?" she demanded. The man's gaze shifted to her, softening for just a breath before hardening again. "Knew him? I knew the whole family, and I know what happened here. If you've got sense, you'll get back in your car and never look behind you." But sense had never been part of grief. I stepped closer, feeling the damp soil sink under my shoes. "Tell me who you are." He looked past me at the unmarked grave. "Name's Clyde. Been working these fields since before your husband ran south and reinvented himself. And if you've got a shred of love for him left, you'll stop digging." My heart hammered. Reinvented himself. Joshua had been many things, gentle, patient, sometimes secretive, but never a liar. "What's buried here?" I asked, voice sharper than I expected. Clyde spat into the dirt, eyes narrowing. "Trouble, blood, and the truth your husband didn't want you choking on." Lila took a step forward. "You can't just show up, throw out cryptic lines and think we'll leave." Her voice wavered, but she stood her ground. "That was my father. If he had demons, we deserve to know." Clyde's expression twisted, equal parts pity and contempt. "Demons? You don't even know the half of it." The silence between us stretched until the birches creaked in the wind. Finally, he said, "If you're dead set on learning, start in the house. Attic. That's where the bones of a family stay closest to the surface." He turned, unlatching the gate with a shove, and walked away, boots grinding against gravel until the sound dissolved into the distance. Lila exhaled shakily. "He's insane." But I wasn't so sure. My legs carried me back toward the farmhouse like they already knew the way. The attic. Joshua had left us a map. Clyde had left us a warning. Together they pointed the same direction. The attic stairs groaned under our weight. Dust floated thick, every step stirring the air like ghosts rising. The door at the top stuck, swollen with damp, and I had to throw my shoulder against it. It burst open, releasing a stale breath of mothballs and cedar. Our flashlight beams cut across cardboard boxes stacked in uneven towers, furniture draped in yellowed sheets, and a trunk at the far end beneath a small round window. Lila wrinkled her nose. "Smells like dead mice." I knelt at the trunk, fingers trembling as I touched the brass latch. It wasn't locked. The lid creaked open, revealing bundles of letters tied with string, their envelopes browned at the edges. Ink faded to sepia. On top lay a smaller box, wooden, carved with initials. BM. My chest tightened. Barry Mitchell. I lifted the lid. Inside lay a boy's watch, leather strap cracked, hands frozen at 4:12. Next to it, a Polaroid photograph. Joshua as a teenager, standing beside a casket. His face wasn't grief-stricken. It was blank, almost stunned. Behind him, mourners blurred in shadows. My hand shook as I passed it to Lila. "Is that Uncle Barry?" she asked softly, as if testing the words. I didn't answer. My eyes had caught on a letter at the bottom of the trunk, untied, folded twice. The handwriting was jagged, uneven, desperate. I read aloud before I could stop myself. "I swear it wasn't an accident." He pushed him, said no one would believe me, said he'd make me disappear too. "If you find this, please, don't let them bury me without my name." The paper slipped from my hands. Lila's eyes widened, reflecting the weak flashlight glow. "Pushed who?" she whispered. The room spun. The unmarked grave, the letter, the photograph. A story was building, terrible and undeniable. "Your father had a brother," I said slowly, each word tasting foreign. "And something happened here that he never wanted us to know." The attic creaked then, not from us, from something shifting deeper in the shadows. Lila gasped, swinging her light. The beam landed on a rocking chair in the corner. It moved once, a slow creak forward, then back, though no one sat in it. "Mom," Lila whispered, gripping my arm. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. Old houses, they breathe, but the words rang hollow. We left the attic with the letter and the photograph, both burning in my hands like evidence. Downstairs, the air felt heavier, colder. The silence had teeth. That night we stayed in a roadside motel, peeling wallpaper and buzzing neon outside the window. Lila sat on the bed, knees pulled up to her chest, reading the letter again and again. What if he was the one who... She couldn't finish. I stared at the ceiling, the words of Clyde ringing in my head. "Your husband should have burned this place to the ground." Sleep came shallow and strange, full of dreams where Joshua stood at the foot of my bed, lips moving soundlessly, pointing to the birches. When I woke, Lila was already dressed, clutching the car keys. "We're going back," she said, her voice steel now, not fear. "Back to the farm, back to the cemetery, back to the grave that waited, silent, unmarked, and maybe back to the truth Joshua had buried long before he buried himself." We drove in silence the next morning, the gravel lane swallowing us whole once again. Mist clung low over the fields, blurring the edges of the world. Lila's grip on the wheel was white-knuckled, her jaw set with determination that looked too much like her father's when he was angry. I sat beside her, clutching the trunk's letter and photograph, feeling the weight of them drag at my chest. The words, "He pushed him," repeated like a drumbeat in my head. The farmhouse loomed out of the fog, its broken windows like hollow eyes. We parked in the same spot, though this time we didn't hesitate. We moved quickly through the house, past the kitchen with its cracked sink, past the staircase that leaned like a tired man. The cemetery gate waited. Only now, in daylight, the place felt sharper, the birches gleaming white against the gray. The unmarked grave yawned at the back, raw earth darker than the others. "Mom," Lila said, her voice low. "What if Clyde was right? What if Dad left this place behind for a reason?" I swallowed hard. "Then we'll know the reason." The padlock was gone, the chain slack, as though someone had already been here. My stomach dropped. We stepped through, shoes sinking into damp moss. Lila knelt by the unmarked grave, tracing its edge with her fingertips. "This isn't old," she murmured. "Not even a year." I crouched beside her. The letter's words burned in my ears. "Don't let them bury me without my name." My throat tightened. Who was here? Barry? Or someone else? And why had Joshua fought so hard to keep me away? A twig snapped behind us. We spun. Clyde stood at the edge of the trees, arms crossed, face hard as stone. "I told you not to come back." "You know something," I said, standing quickly. "You knew my husband. You know what's in this ground." Clyde shook his head. "Knowing and saying are two different things, and words have a price." Lila stepped forward, her anger bubbling up. "Then name the damn price, because we're not leaving until you tell us." For the first time, Clyde's eyes flickered with something. Fear, maybe, or pity. He looked at me, not Lila. Your husband carried guilt heavier than any coffin. He wasn't the one who pushed Barry, but he covered for the one who did. The air froze. My heart pounded so loud it hurt. Who? I whispered. Clyde's gaze shifted toward the farmhouse. Your father-in-law, Old Man Mitchell, mean as they come. Everyone in town knew it, but no one crossed him. Barry fell, or so the papers said. But Josh? He saw. He knew. And when the old man threatened to ruin him, he stayed quiet. That grave back there, that's the boy who spoke up. The cousin who told the truth. They silenced him for it. Lila's face went pale. And Dad, he lived with that? Clyde nodded once, slowly. Left this place and never looked back. Built himself a new life in the States. But the past doesn't rot easy. Especially not here. The birches swayed, though no wind stirred. The air smelled of wet earth, sharp and metallic, like blood. I stared at the grave, bile rising in my throat. So, all these years, Joshua carried their sins. And now you do, Clyde said. His voice was final, like a gavel. He turned and disappeared into the trees, leaving us in the silence of the cemetery, the truth clawing at our throats. That night at the motel, I couldn't eat, couldn't drink, couldn't even look at Lila without seeing the fracture in her face. She sat cross-legged on the bed, holding the photograph of Joshua and Barry. He wasn't a liar, she said finally. He was a protector, even if it broke him. Her words tore something inside me. But protecting isn't the same as loving honestly, I whispered. He let me love a version of him that wasn't whole. He let me build a life on half a truth. Lila's eyes shimmered. So what do we do? Dig it up? Report it? Or let it rot like he wanted? I couldn't answer. Outside, the motel's neon sign flickered, painting the room in broken red light. My reflection in the window looked older than I'd ever seen myself. A woman, both widow and detective, both betrayed and bound by love. In my dreams, Joshua stood among the birches again, whispering words I couldn't catch, pointing again to the grave. Only this time, when I looked down, the stone bore my name. I woke gasping, drenched in sweat, and I knew. This story wasn't finished. The dead still had more to say. The next morning, sunlight broke thin and watery through the motel curtains, but it did little to warm me. My hands still shook from the dream. Lila sat at the little round table by the window, scrolling on her laptop, her hair pulled into a messy braid. She looked up when she heard me stir. I've been digging, she said, pushing the laptop toward me. Online archives. Local newspaper from the 80s. Look, the headline blurred until I blinked twice. Local teen dies in farm accident. Beneath it, a grainy photo of a boy, Barry Mitchell. The article was short, clipped, dismissive. Tragic fall from the hayloft. Survived by his parents, siblings. Nothing about suspicion. Nothing about witnesses. Scroll down, Lila urged. Another article appeared 2 weeks later. Mitchell family donates to community center in memory of son. Smiling photographs of Joshua's parents shaking hands with town officials. A gloss of charity overwrought. That's it, Lila said bitterly. Nothing about Dad. Nothing about the cousin Clyde mentioned. No police notes, no questions. Just tidied up. I rubbed my temple. The Mitchell name carried weight. Money covers sins better than dirt. Lila leaned forward, eyes burning. We need proof, something no one could bury. Her words landed heavy. Proof meant the grave. Proof meant dirt on our hands, both literally and figuratively. I hesitated. The key to the cemetery still in my pocket like it pulsed. If we do this, there's no going back. Lila's chin lifted. Maybe that's the point. Before we went back to the farm, we stopped in town. A single main street with faded brick storefronts, a diner, a post office, a hardware store. Everything carried the air of a place left behind by time. Inside the diner, the bell jingled as we entered. Conversation slowed, then resumed in murmurs. The walls were lined with black and white photos of church socials and harvest festivals. An older woman behind the counter eyed us with open suspicion. Coffee? Yes, thank you, I said, my voice too polite, too nervous. Lila slid into a booth across from me, whispering, They know who we are. The waitress returned with 2 chipped mugs. You're Joshua's people, she said. Not a question. My breath caught. I'm his widow. Her lips pursed. Didn't think I'd ever see Mitchell Blood back in town. Something in her tone wasn't welcome. It was warning. We're just visiting the farm, I said carefully. Her eyes sharpened. That place is cursed ground. Best you leave it be. She poured more coffee without asking, then shuffled off before we could press her. Lila leaned in. They all know. Everyone. They just won't say it out loud. My stomach churned. Secrets don't die. They ferment. We drove back to the farmhouse that afternoon. The sky had gone heavy with clouds, the kind that pressed low and gray. The birches at the edge of the cemetery shivered. The gate was still ajar from our last visit. The unmarked grave waited, earth damp and dark. Lila set her jaw and grabbed the shovel we'd bought at the hardware store, her movements sharp, decisive. Wait, I said, my throat raw. If we do this, we're disturbing the dead. They're already disturbed, she shot back. Then she struck the ground. The sound echoed through the birches, metal biting earth over and over. I joined her, every thrust of the shovel pulling secrets closer to the surface. The soil gave way reluctantly, clumps breaking apart, roots snapping. My palms blistered, sweat stung my eyes. And then, the shovel hit something solid. We froze. Lila knelt, brushing dirt with trembling hands. Wood emerged, dark and damp. A coffin. Small. Too small for a grown man. My chest tightened, nausea rising. Mom, Lila whispered. This isn't Barry. I crouched, heart thundering, and saw it too. The size, unmistakable. A child. Before either of us could speak, a voice drifted from behind us, low and broken. Now you see why he begged you to stay away. We spun. Clyde stood at the gate again, face grim, eyes on the coffin. Whose grave is this? I demanded. Clyde stepped closer, rain beginning to spit against his shoulders. Not Barry's, not the cousin's. That one belonged to Joshua's baby sister. My knees nearly buckled. What? She wasn't supposed to be out by the barn, Clyde said. But she followed Barry and Josh one day. Accident or not, she fell, cracked her skull clean. The old man buried her quiet, swore everyone to silence, said the family didn't need another stain. Josh carried that guilt till his last breath. The rain thickened, drops slapping against leaves and soil. Lila's face went pale. Why no marker? She whispered. Clyde shook his head. Because she wasn't meant to exist anymore. Erased, like she never breathed. The coffin lay before us, the truth undeniable, the silence of years broken open. My hands trembled so violently I dropped the shovel. Joshua's voice echoed in my head. Never go to the farm, Catherine. Promise me. Now I understood, and I wished for the first time that I had kept that promise. The next morning, sunlight broke thin and watery through the motel curtains, but it did little to warm me. My hands still shook from the dream. Lila sat at the little round table by the window, scrolling on her laptop, her hair pulled into a messy braid. She looked up when she heard me stir. I've been digging, she said, pushing the laptop toward me. Online archives. Local newspaper from the 80s. Look. The headline blurred until I blinked twice. Local teen dies in farm accident. Beneath it, a grainy photo of a boy, Barry Mitchell. The article was short, clipped, dismissive. Tragic fall from the hayloft. Survived by his parents, siblings. Nothing about suspicion. Nothing about witnesses. Scroll down, Lila urged. Another article appeared 2 weeks later. Mitchell family donates to community center in memory of son. Smiling photographs of Joshua's parents shaking hands with town officials. A gloss of charity over rot. That's it, Lila said bitterly. Nothing about Dad. Nothing about the cousin Clyde mentioned. No police notes, no questions. Just tidied up. I rubbed my temple. The Mitchell name carried weight. Money covers sins better than dirt. Lila leaned forward, eyes burning. We need proof. Something no one could bury. Her words landed heavy. Proof meant the grave. Proof meant dirt on our hands, both literally and figuratively. I hesitated. The key to the cemetery still in my pocket like it pulsed. If we do this, there's no going back. Lila's chin lifted. Maybe that's the point. Before we went back to the farm, we stopped in town. A single main street with faded brick storefronts, a diner, a post office, a hardware store. Everything carried the air of a place left behind by time. Inside the diner, the bell jingled as we entered. Conversation slowed, then resumed in murmurs. The walls were lined with black and white photos of church socials and harvest festivals. An older woman behind the counter eyed us with open suspicion. Coffee? Yes, thank you, I said, my voice too polite, too nervous. Lila slid into a booth across from me, whispering, "They know who we are." The waitress returned with 2 chipped mugs. "You're Joshua's people," she said. Not a question. My breath caught. "I'm his widow." Her lips pursed. Didn't think I'd ever see Mitchell Blood back in town. Something in her tone wasn't welcome. It was warning. "We're just visiting the farm," I said carefully. Her eyes sharpened. "That place is cursed ground. Best you leave it be." She poured more coffee without asking, then shuffled off before we could press her. Lila leaned in. "They all know. Everyone. They just won't say it out loud." My stomach churned. Secrets don't die. They ferment. We drove back to the farmhouse that afternoon. The sky had gone heavy with clouds, the kind that pressed low and gray. The birches at the edge of the cemetery shivered. The gate was still ajar from our last visit. The unmarked grave waited, earth damp and dark. Lila set her jaw and grabbed the shovel we'd bought at the hardware store, her movements sharp, decisive. "Wait," I said, my throat raw. "If we do this, we're disturbing the dead." "They're already disturbed," she shot back. Then she struck the ground. The sound echoed through the birches, metal biting earth, over and over. I joined her, every thrust of the shovel pulling secrets closer to the surface. The soil gave way reluctantly, clumps breaking apart, roots snapping. My palms blistered, sweat stung my eyes. And then, the shovel hit something solid. We froze. Lila knelt, brushing dirt with trembling hands. Wood emerged, dark and damp. A coffin. Small. Too small for a grown man. My chest tightened, nausea rising. "Mom," Lila whispered, "this isn't Barry." I crouched, heart thundering, and saw it too. The size, unmistakable. A child. Before either of us could speak, a voice drifted from behind us, low and broken. "Now you see why he begged you to stay away." We spun. Clyde stood at the gate again, face grim, eyes on the coffin. "Whose grave is this?" I demanded. Clyde stepped closer, rain beginning to spit against his shoulders. "Not Barry's. Not the cousin's. That one belonged to Joshua's baby sister." My knees nearly buckled. "What? She wasn't supposed to be out by the barn," Clyde said. "But she followed Barry and Josh one day. Accident or not, she fell. Cracked her skull clean. The old man buried her quiet, swore everyone to silence. Said the family didn't need another stain. Josh carried that guilt till his last breath. The rain thickened, drops slapping against leaves and soil. Lila's face went pale. "Why no marker?" she whispered. Clyde shook his head. "Because she wasn't meant to exist anymore. Erased. Like she never breathed." The coffin lay before us, the truth undeniable, the silence of years broken open. My hands trembled so violently I dropped the shovel. Joshua's voice echoed in my head. "Never go to the farm, Catherine. Promise me." Now I understood, and I wished, for the first time, that I had kept that promise. The rain turned the soil into black muck, streaking down the coffin's wood in thin rivulets. My throat clenched as though the storm itself was squeezing it shut. Lila's face was ghost pale, her hair plastered to her forehead, but she didn't move. Her eyes stayed locked on the tiny coffin. "Tell us everything," I said, my voice low, almost a growl. My body shook, but not from cold, from rage. Clyde hesitated, his jaw working. For a moment, I thought he'd walk away, like last time, vanish into the trees and leave us drowning in half-truths. But then he stepped inside the gate, mud sucking at his boots. "She was 8, he said flatly. "Her name was Emily. Sweet kid. Too quiet for her own good. Followed her brothers everywhere. That day, she trailed Barry and Josh out to the barn. Nobody saw what happened except them." The birches groaned in the wind. I heard Josh screaming. Clyde went on. His voice cracked just once, then steadied. "By the time I got there, Barry was in shock. Josh had blood on his shirt, and Emily was already gone. Skull caved in from the ladder fall. But the old man, he didn't want the shame. Didn't want neighbors whispering about negligence. Said she'd been too sickly to last anyway." Lila gasped. I staggered back, covering my mouth. The air around us thickened, pressing in. "He buried her right here," Clyde said, pointing at the coffin. "No service, no obituary. Told everyone she'd gone to live with relatives in Manitoba. Even their mother played along. Fear does that to a woman. And Josh? He never forgave himself for not watching her close enough. Never forgave the old man for erasing her like she wasn't flesh and blood." The rain poured harder, hammering the leaves. Lila wiped her face, smearing dirt and tears together. "So Dad kept this secret for his whole life?" Clyde nodded. "And it ate him alive. You think he left because he wanted freedom?" "No. He left because every corner of this place whispered Emily's name. Because every night he swore he could hear her crying out here in the cemetery." The birches bent, creaking under the storm. I shivered, though not from the cold. "That's why he warned you," Clyde said, eyes burning into mine. "He didn't want her ghost on your shoulders, too." The word ghost lingered, too heavy, too deliberate. That night back at the motel, thunder shook the thin walls. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Emily's name pounding in my head. The photograph of Joshua and Barry sat on the nightstand, face down. I couldn't bear to see it. Around 3 a.m., I heard it. Light footsteps in the room above us. Except this was a single-story motel. My breath froze. Then came a soft sound, faint as a sigh. "Mommy!" I bolted upright. Lila stirred, rubbing her eyes. "What is it? You didn't hear that?" I whispered. She blinked at me. "Hear what?" The silence stretched, heavy, unnatural. My pulse refused to slow. We returned to the farmhouse the next morning, though my body begged me not to. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean, but raw. The cemetery soil was churned and heavy, the coffin still lying exposed in its shallow grave. Lila touched the wood gently, her lips trembling. "We can't leave her like this." I nodded, throat tight. "She deserves a marker, a name." But before we could discuss it further, the front door of the farmhouse slammed open. We spun. A man we hadn't seen before stormed out onto the porch. Older, maybe in his 60s, heavy-set, face flushed with anger. "What the hell are you doing on my property?" he barked. Clyde appeared from the woods, shouting back. "You got no right here, Gerald. You let that girl rot in the ground without a name." Gerald. The name slammed into me like a fist. Joshua's cousin? Uncle? My mind scrambled, piecing threads. He stormed toward us, fists clenched. "You Mitchell women need to leave before you dig yourselves into something you can't crawl out of." Lila stepped forward, her voice shaking but fierce. "We're not leaving her. She was our blood. She was my aunt." Gerald sneered. "Then you'll suffer the same curse your father did. This family eats its own." The air between us seemed to split. My heart pounded so loud I barely heard my own words when I said, "Then let it eat me, Gerald. But she will not stay nameless." Gerald's eyes darkened, his mouth curling into something between rage and fear. For a moment I swore I saw a flicker of movement behind him, small, pale, darting across the porch like a child's shadow. And then the air turned colder than death. Gerald's face flushed red as he stomped toward us, the ground sucking at his boots. His voice boomed across the cemetery. "You think you're doing her a favor?" he spat, pointing at the coffin. "All you're doing is tearing open scars that should have stayed buried. That girl's death nearly destroyed this family once. Don't make it happen again." I stepped in front of Lila, my arms instinctively spreading. "Destroyed? No. Covered up. Silenced. You erased her like she was nothing. You think that's what she deserved?" Gerald's eyes narrowed, the veins in his neck bulging. "You don't know what you're talking about, Catherine. You married into this family. You don't get to rewrite its history." Lila's voice cracked, but it cut sharp as glass. "She was my father's sister. That makes her our history too. And we're not running from it." The birch trees groaned, their white trunks bending in the wind though the air was still. Gerald's shoulders stiffened. He must have felt it too. That unnatural shift, like the ground itself was listening. From the woods, Clyde shouted, "Don't you dare threaten them, Gerald. You've been covering the old man's sins for 40 years. Time it came out." Gerald whirled on him. "You shut your damn mouth. You think you know what really happened? You were just a farmhand, always sniffing around where you didn't belong. And I saw more truth than you'll ever admit." Clyde snapped back. His voice carried, strong and raw. I saw her carried out of that barn. I saw your uncle order Joshua to keep silent. And I saw you shovel dirt on top of her that night, Gerald. The silence after those words was heavy, choking. Lila gasped. My knees buckled. Gerald's face drained of color. You don't know what you saw, he stammered, but his voice faltered, the strength gone from it. You were just a boy yourself. Clyde stepped closer, fists trembling at his sides. I know what I saw, and so does she. He pointed at the coffin. The air dropped 10 degrees in an instant. I could see my breath plume out. The birches whispered without wind, their branches rattling like bones. And then, soft and fragile but clear as a bell, a child's voice drifted between us. Josh. Lila clutched my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Gerald staggered back, eyes wide. No, he muttered. No, no, no. The ground shivered beneath our feet. The coffin creaked, wood groaning like it hadn't in decades. My heart thundered in my ears. Mom, Lila whispered. She's here. The voice came again, stronger, carrying through the cemetery like a hymn. Don't leave me. Gerald let out a strangled cry and bolted for the farmhouse, stumbling over his own feet. Clyde stood rooted, his face pale but resolute. I dropped to my knees beside the coffin, tears burning hot. Emily, I whispered into the damp air, not caring how mad it sounded. You are not forgotten. You have a name, and I swear, I'll give it back to you. The birches stilled. The air softened, just a fraction. But the presence remained, watching, waiting. Lila knelt beside me, her voice breaking. We'll tell your story. We'll make them all remember. Clyde's rough voice carried over us, hoarse but steady. Then you'd best be ready, because Gerald won't stop, and the Mitchell name won't go down without a fight. I looked at him, at my daughter, at the tiny coffin that had lived in silence for 40 years. My heart hardened with something I hadn't felt since Joshua's death. Purpose. The motel room felt like a cage that night. The hum of the air conditioner was the only sound, but my ears strained for another voice. Small, fragile, echoing from the cemetery. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the coffin, saw Gerald's face when that whisper filled the air, saw my husband, Joshua, clutching his secrets like a rosary until the day he died. Lila sat on the edge of the bed, her hands buried in her hair. Mom, did you hear her? I need to know I didn't imagine it. You didn't, I said quietly. My voice shook, but I forced it steady. She was there. The silence stretched between us until it pressed on my ribs. Finally, Lila lifted her head. Her eyes burned with something fierce. Then we can't leave her. We can't just drive home and pretend none of this happened. We have to do something. What? I asked, though I already knew. Bring her into the light, she said. Tell the truth. Tell the police. Put her name back where it belongs. Dad didn't have the strength to, but we do. Her conviction rattled me. My grief still wanted to protect Joshua, to cradle his memory instead of tearing it apart. But when I closed my eyes, I saw Emily's face, though I had never known it, pressed against the glass of time, begging to be remembered. I didn't answer. The next morning, Clyde was waiting by our car in the gravel lot. His face looked like it had aged another decade overnight. You've stirred something you can't just set down again, he said as soon as we approached. Gerald won't quit. And the rest of this town? They'll close ranks like they always have. I crossed my arms. Then help us. If you saw what you say you did, you can testify. You can back this up. Clyde shook his head. They'll say I'm bitter, that I've hated the Mitchells all my life. They'll say I've got nothing but stories. The only proof you've got is in that coffin. Lila stepped forward. Then we'll dig her up officially. We'll bring in the police. They can't ignore a child's body. But Clyde's eyes darkened. You don't get it. That body will bring questions, sure. But it won't bring peace. Not to you, not to your father's memory, and not to Emily. His words chilled me. What do you mean? Clyde hesitated, then said, She's restless because she was buried nameless. You give her a name, she might quiet. But you dig her up, parade her bones in front of strangers? She'll never leave. The birch trees at the edge of the lot whispered like they agreed. We went back to the cemetery that afternoon, armed with candles, paper, and a piece of slate from the hardware store. My plan was simple. Give Emily the marker she'd been denied. Lila carved her name with a trembling hand, every stroke of the chisel cracking like thunder in my ears. Emily Mitchell, 1974, 1982. We set it at the head of the grave, lit the candles, and stood in silence. The birches swayed though the air was still. The ground seemed to hum beneath us, a vibration that rose into my bones. Then, soft and fragile, came the same voice as before. Thank you. Tears blurred my vision. I dropped to my knees. You're not forgotten, I whispered. Not anymore. The air lifted, warm for the first time. The candles flickered but did not go out. Lila's face softened, relief breaking through her grief. But the peace lasted only a moment. A car engine roared in the distance. Headlights cut through the trees. Gerald's truck barreled up the gravel path, mud flying from the tires. He slammed to a stop at the gate, jumped out, and pointed a shotgun straight at us. I told you to leave it alone, he bellowed. Rainwater and spit flew from his mouth. You think a rock and some candles will undo what was done? You think you're better than the rest of us? Lila froze, the chisel still in her hand. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I stepped forward, shielding her. She's your family too, Gerald, I said, my voice shaking. She deserves more than silence. His eyes flicked to the grave, then back to me. What she deserves, he snarled, is to stay buried, along with every secret this family ever had. Behind me, the birches moaned. The air thickened again, colder, heavier. The ground trembled underfoot. And then the child's voice came again, no longer soft, no longer fragile. It rang clear, sharp, and furious. No! Gerald's face went white. The shotgun slipped from his hands, clattering to the ground. He staggered back, his breath hitching. God forgive us, he whispered, before turning and running, crashing through the trees like a hunted man. The candles flared, their flames stretching tall. The earth stilled. The air softened once more. Lila clutched my hand. Mom, she's with us. I squeezed her fingers, tears streaming hot and fast. Yes, baby, I whispered, and she's not letting go until the whole truth comes out. The next morning, I woke to the sound of church bells in the distance, faint but steady. The motel curtains glowed with a weak, washed-out sun, but the light didn't reach inside me. My whole body felt heavy, like grief had seeped into my bones. Lila sat cross-legged at the table, her laptop open again, her face pale and puffy from crying. She looked up at me, her voice hoarse. They won't believe us. I rubbed my eyes, still raw from tears. Who won't? She turned the screen toward me. On the local news site was a short article, no more than 3 paragraphs. Residents reported disturbance at Mitchell Farm Cemetery. Sheriff's office declined comment. No ongoing investigation. My throat tightened. Already covered up. Lila's jaw clenched. This town's rotten to the core. They've been protecting themselves for decades. I thought of Gerald's face when Emily's voice broke the air, of the shotgun falling from his hands, of his terrified run into the woods. A man who carried secrets like weapons, undone by the voice of a child. My husband's family had built an entire legacy out of silence and lies. Now we were expected to leave it there, to walk away like Joshua had, to let another generation suffer under the weight of the past. But Emily wasn't letting us. We drove back to the farmhouse. This time, the birches stood quiet, their branches still as if they were waiting. The cemetery gate creaked open easily under my hand, as though it had been expecting us. The grave was there, the new slate marker still standing, candles melted to stubs. The air was softer, calmer, but heavy with anticipation. I walked forward slowly, my shoes sinking into the damp earth, and whispered, "We came back." Lila knelt at the grave, her palm flat on the stone. "What do you want us to do now?" she asked, her voice trembling but sure. For a moment there was only silence, the kind that presses on your chest until you can hardly breathe. Then the ground shifted beneath us, not violently, but enough to feel, like a shiver rising from the soil. The wind stirred though the sky was still, and then, faintly, we heard it again. A child's voice, unmistakable, ringing with clarity. "Find the others." My stomach dropped. The others. Lila's head whipped toward me, eyes wide. "Mom, there are more." I swallowed hard, staring at the line of old headstones leaning in the weeds. Some toppled, some unreadable. One in particular, half sunk and cracked, caught my eye. The name was almost gone, eroded by time, but the year was still visible. 1982. The same year as Emily. My heart thudded. It wasn't just her. Lila stood, brushing dirt from her knees, her breathing ragged. We have to know. Dad carried this secret because he thought it would destroy us. But maybe it was destroying him instead. Maybe the only way to let him rest is to uncover everything. We began to clear the graves, pulling weeds, brushing away moss, tracing faint letters with our fingers. Some were older, Mitchell ancestors going back a century. But 2 stones near the back made my blood run cold, both small, both marked only with initials. One bore the letters CM, the other so eroded it was almost gone. Lila covered her mouth. Children. Mom. There were more children. My hands shook as I pressed against the stone, feeling the roughness scrape my skin. Why had Joshua never told me? Why had he chosen silence over confession? Even with me, his wife. Behind us, the crunch of gravel broke the air. I turned, heart racing, expecting Gerald with another weapon. Instead, it was Clyde, walking slow, his hat in his hands. He looked at the stones we'd uncovered and let out a long, shaky breath. You found them, he said quietly. My voice cracked. Who were they? He didn't answer at first. He just stood there, staring at the ground like it might open up and swallow him. Then he said, cousins, nieces, anyone who embarrassed the family name, anyone who made the Mitchells look weak. They didn't all die by accident, Catherine. Some of them were made to disappear. The words twisted in my gut. Lila's knees gave out, and she sat hard on the ground, shaking her head. This is evil, she whispered. Clyde crouched beside her, his voice rough but steady. That family wore respectability like armor, but underneath, it was rot. Joshua was the only one who ran far enough to escape, and even he couldn't shake it. It followed him to the grave. I stared at the small stones, at the broken markers, at the earth that had swallowed children whole. My chest ached. My throat burned. Then we dig them all up, I said. We name every last one of them. Clyde's eyes flicked to mine, heavy with something between warning and respect. If you do that, this whole town will come after you. The Mitchells paid off lawmen, judges, pastors, people who owed them everything. You bring those bodies into the light, you'll have enemies you can't even see. I don't care, I snapped, my voice raw. If Emily asked us to find the others, then we will, no matter what it costs. The birches shivered. The wind rose, carrying the faint sound of children's laughter, distant but clear, like it was echoing through time. The earth hummed beneath our feet, and for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt fury. Fury for Joshua, who had carried this poison in silence. Fury for Emily, buried nameless. Fury for every child erased to protect a family's pride. Lila stood, her shoulders squared, her voice steel. Then we dig. The first strike of the shovel felt like sacrilege. The soil was damp and clung to the blade, releasing a sour metallic smell that made bile rise in my throat. Lila dug beside me, her hair sticking to her face, her breath coming sharp and fast. We worked in silence, the only sounds the scrape of metal against earth and the occasional crow calling from the trees. Clyde stood nearby, arms folded, his face pale but resolute. He didn't try to stop us this time. The ground gave way easier than I expected, like it wanted to be disturbed. When the wood of another coffin appeared, small and sunken, I dropped to my knees, brushing dirt away with my bare hands. My skin stung, but I didn't care. The initials carved crudely into the lid were still visible. CM. My chest tightened. Who was this? I asked, my voice breaking. Clyde's eyes lowered. Caleb, Joshua's cousin. Born weak, couldn't walk right. The old man said he was an embarrassment. One winter the boy disappeared. Folks whispered he'd been sent to a hospital down south, but I knew better. Lila gasped, pressing her hands to her mouth. I felt my stomach churn, rage and grief colliding in a storm I could barely contain. A family that would rather bury their children than admit imperfection. A family that fed its pride with bones. We moved to the second stone, half collapsed and nearly swallowed by roots. The soil here was heavier, wetter. It clung to the shovel, fought against us. But eventually the wood appeared, cracked and rotting. No initials this time. Just silence. I knelt, tears streaming down my cheeks. "Who are you?" I whispered, my palm pressed to the coffin. "Tell me your name." The birches shivered, though the air was still. Then, faint as breath against my ear, I heard it. "Anna." I jerked back, my heart hammering. Lila's eyes widened. "Mom." I heard it too. The air grew colder, the silence thick. Clyde bowed his head. That was Joshua's niece, Gerald's little girl. She vanished when she was 6. They said she drowned in the river. His voice cracked. But I knew. The 3 of us stood in a triangle around the grave, the name Anna echoing between us like a bell that couldn't be unrung. My knees buckled, and I fell forward, clutching the coffin. "You're not forgotten," I sobbed. "None of you are forgotten. I'll make them say your names. I'll carve them in stone. I'll burn this family's lies to the ground if I have to." The earth beneath us trembled. The birches groaned, their white trunks swaying though no wind moved. And then, as if answering me, the laughter came again. Not cruel, not mocking. Children's laughter, light and echoing, filling the cemetery like sunlight through storm clouds. Lila collapsed beside me, tears streaming down her face. "She's with them," she whispered. "Emily found them." For the first time since Joshua's death, I felt something other than grief. I felt purpose, burning hot and unstoppable. I stood, my voice hoarse but strong. "We take this to the police, to the newspapers, to anyone who will listen. If the town wants to fight us, let them. I won't carry their silence anymore." Clyde looked at me, his face etched with years of fear and guilt. Slowly he nodded. "Then you'll need more than shovels and prayers. You'll need proof no one can bury again." I turned to the graves, to the tiny coffins unearthed by our hands, to the voices that still lingered in the air. "They are the proof," I said, "and I won't rest until the world sees them." The candles from Emily's grave flickered to life on their own, small flames bending toward us as though in blessing. And for the first time, I felt Emily's voice not as a whisper, but as a promise. I'm not alone anymore. By the time we drove into town the next morning, word had already spread. People watched us from storefront windows and gas pumps, their eyes following our car with suspicion and something darker, fear. The Mitchell name still cast a shadow here, long after Joshua left, long after Emily's tiny coffin was lowered into the dirt without a word. We pulled up in front of the sheriff's office, a squat brick building with faded paint and a flag that flapped lazily in the autumn breeze. My stomach knotted as I stepped out, clutching the folder of photographs we'd taken. Images of the graves, the coffins, the stones with initials and dates too cruel to ignore. Lila was right beside me, her jaw set, her fingers trembling against the strap of her bag. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee and dust. The receptionist, a woman with iron-gray hair, looked up from her crossword and frowned. "Can I help you?" I cleared my throat. "We need to speak with the sheriff. It's about the Mitchell farm." Her eyes flickered, recognition sharp as a blade. "What about it?" Before I could answer, a door creaked open, and a man in uniform stepped out. Tall, thick around the middle, face weathered from years of small-town authority. His nameplate read, Sheriff D. Holloway. "The Mitchell farm?" he asked, his voice tight. "What business you got there?" I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. My husband was Joshua Mitchell. I'm his widow. We uncovered graves on the property, children's graves, unmarked, forgotten. We have photographs. We want this investigated. The room seemed to contract. The receptionist froze, pen poised above paper. Holloway's face hardened, his jaw tightening as though I'd struck him. He didn't even glance at the photos when I laid them on the counter. He just shook his head slowly. "You need to stop right there, ma'am," he said. "Those graves are family matters, old history. Nothing criminal here." My blood boiled. Nothing criminal? Children were buried without records, without markers, without justice. My husband carried this secret until it killed him. And you're telling me it's nothing? Holloway leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "I'm telling you to let sleeping dogs lie. The Mitchells built this town. You start digging too deep, you'll find more trouble than you can handle." Lila's voice cracked through the tension. "We already found it, and we're not going to stop." A silence followed, heavy as a coffin lid. Finally, Holloway exhaled through his nose. Best you two pack up and head back south. You stir this hornet's nest, you'll regret it. He turned and walked back into his office, the door shutting with a final click. The receptionist wouldn't meet our eyes. We walked out into the sunlight, my hands shaking, fury roaring in my chest. Lila grabbed my arm. He's in on it. They all are. The town, the police, maybe even the church. Everyone's been covering this for decades. I stared at the photographs in my hands, my vision swimming. Then we don't stop with the sheriff. We go bigger. The diner's windows reflected us as we passed. 2 women carrying a storm on their shoulders. Inside, conversations hushed. Eyes followed us. Whispers chased our steps. The whole town already knew, and they wanted us gone. Clyde met us outside the hardware store, his face tight with worry. You went to Holloway, didn't you? I nodded. He shut us down. Clyde cursed under his breath, his hands balling into fists. Of course he did. The Mitchells funded his campaign every term for 20 years. He's their guard dog. Then how do we fight back? I asked, desperation cracking my voice. He glanced around, lowering his voice. You need someone outside this town. A journalist, maybe. Someone who doesn't owe the Mitchells a damn thing. Lila's eyes lit up with grim determination. Then that's what we'll do. We'll make sure the whole world knows. But even as she said it, I felt it. The shift in the air. The way the ground seemed to hum beneath my feet even here, in the middle of town. The children's voices, faint but insistent, echoing in the back of my mind. Find the others. Tell the truth. Justice wasn't going to wait for slow wheels of law. The dead were demanding it now. That night in the motel, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard them. Small voices weaving through the air like lullabies turned sour. Some whispered names. Some cried softly. Some laughed. The sound hollow and sharp, like glass breaking underfoot. I pressed the pillow over my head, but nothing stopped it. Lila tossed and turned across the room, and I knew she heard them too. At one point she sat up suddenly, clutching her chest. Mom, she whispered. I think they're in here with us. The lamps flickered, buzzing, though the storm outside had already passed. The mirror over the dresser clouded, as though someone had breathed on it. When I got up to wipe it clear, there was writing. Just one word, jagged, smeared across the glass like a child's finger had traced it. Liars. I staggered back, my pulse hammering. Lila clutched my arm, her face pale, her mouth open in shock. Mom, this isn't just about the past anymore. They're here. They want... She cut herself off, her eyes darting to the mirror again. The word had changed. Now it read, truth. We left before dawn. We couldn't stay boxed in anymore. The children wanted action. They wanted their names spoken out loud, their stories dragged into the sunlight that had been denied them. And if the town wouldn't give it, we'd tear the silence apart ourselves. Clyde met us on the edge of the farm. His face was drawn, his shoulders hunched, like the years had doubled on him overnight. I warned you, he said, voice rough. You woke them up. They were never asleep, I shot back. They were waiting, and they're not going to stop until every last secret is out. He stared at me a long time, then sighed. Then you need to understand. Gerald isn't the only one who'll fight you. There are others still loyal to the Mitchell name. People who owe their livelihoods to that family. You start shouting, they'll shut you up real fast. Let them try, I said, surprising even myself with the steel in my voice. I've been silent too long. I won't do it anymore. We went back into the cemetery, the 3 of us, the morning sun cutting weak beams through the birches. The graves we had uncovered looked raw and open, the earth unsettled, the coffins dark and damp. The marker we had set for Emily stood tall, wax from the candles hardened at its base. I knelt there, pressing my hand to the stone. We'll tell your story, I whispered. All of you. I swear it. The air shifted. The trees hushed. And then, faint but clear, a chorus of voices rose together. Dozens, maybe more. High-pitched, small, fragile, but strong enough to rattle the ground under my knees. Don't stop. Don't stop. Don't stop. Lila's eyes filled with tears. Clyde swayed like the sound had knocked the wind out of him. I felt my chest crack open, grief pouring out, mixing with fury until I was no longer just Catherine Mitchell, widow, Mother, broken woman. I was something harder, something chosen. We won't stop, I said aloud, my voice shaking the morning air. Not until the world knows your names. The voices hushed, fading into the birches, leaving only silence. But it wasn't empty anymore. It was full of promise, heavy with expectation. When I stood, I looked at Clyde. Get us everything you know. Records, letters, stories, anything the family couldn't burn. We'll need it all. He nodded slowly, like he'd been waiting years to hear those words. If you're serious, then you've just declared war on this town. Good, I said. Let them come, because the dead had already chosen their side. By noon, we'd emailed 6 newsrooms and 2 independent podcasts, attaching every photo we had, including the slate marker we carved for Emily. Most bounced back with polite delays, but one reply hit fast. An investigative reporter out of Toronto, Maya Chen, wanted to meet at the farm before sunset. Lila read the email twice, then gripped my hand like a lifeline. We barely had time to celebrate. A deputy's cruiser eased up beside our rented car outside the grocery, window rolling down slow. Ma'am, he said, hat low, voice syrupy with threat. Sheriff Holloway says you're trespassing on private land and interfering with a historical site. If you step foot out there again, we'll book you. I stared at his mirrored sunglasses and saw myself small and shaky inside them, then surprised both of us. Book me, I said. Bring a camera. He smiled without humor. Careful what you wish for. He tipped his hat and pulled away, gravel spitting our ankles. Lila exhaled a curse. He's not bluffing. I started the engine. Neither are we. News in towns like this travels faster than any broadcast. By 3 o'clock, a prayer circle had materialized on the church lawn that faced the courthouse. It looked like a vigil, but the eyes that slid over us were anything but merciful. Pastor Ellison, a tall man with a polished voice and teeth too white for a place this tired, called us the cause of needless disturbance. When he crowned the Mitchells pillars of the community, something in me snapped. I stepped onto the grass, Lila at my side. The pillars you praise are buried under your feet, I said, voice shaking into the microphone someone had thrust forward. Some of them are children. Emily, Caleb, Anna. Say their names. Gasps. A hissed, show some respect. The church's vestibule lights flickered, then brightened, then died. For a breath, everything was still, and then a small sound threaded through the gathered crowd. Children humming the first line of a hymn. Ellison blanched. The chandelier inside the sanctuary tinkled lightly, as if touched by small fingers. No one moved. Say their names, I repeated, quieter. The crowd broke first, not toward us, but away, muttering, crossing themselves, phones held up like talismans that couldn't save them. We met Maya at the farm driveway as the sky went copper and blue. She was small, brisk, and unafraid, camera bag slung across her chest. You're Catherine and Lila, she said, already hitting record on a voice memo. I read your emails, but I need to see everything. We led her to the cemetery. She knelt by Emily's slate, touched the carved letters with 2 fingers, then lifted her lens and took photographs like prayers. You understand, she said. This could blow up your lives. Lila nodded. They already did when they buried them. Maya's pen flew. Names of officials who might be compromised? I gave her Holloway, Ellison, and 3 council members the diner waitress had muttered as we paid. The sound of a truck echoed far off. Maya didn't flinch. I'll file with my editor tonight, but I'm not waiting to publish. We'll push photos and a short column online within the hour. Holloway's cruiser rolled up as though conjured. He planted himself at the gate, hand on his belt. No press on private land, he barked. Maya smiled with all her teeth. We're standing on a right-of-way, Sheriff, and you're standing between me and a public interest story involving potentially unlawful interments. How do you want this on the record? He stared, recalculating. You've got 5 minutes. We didn't make it to 5. Headlights hacked through the trees. Gerald's truck skidded to a stop behind Holloway, another pickup fishtailing in beside it. 2 men jumped out, faces banded with anger, one carrying a gas can, the other a pry bar. Move, Gerald snarled, shoving past the sheriff like he'd paid for the badge. He pointed at the graves we'd opened. We're filling them, tonight. The man with the gas can sloshed a reek across the damp soil. My stomach turned. You'll burn children? I choked. Holloway grabbed Gerald's arm. "Don't be a damn fool." Gerald shook him off. "You had your chance to shut this down." He flicked a lighter. Wind rose without warning, whipping flame sideways, yanking it dead. The birches bowed as if a giant had passed a hand through them. Every grave marker rattled in place. Then a dozen voices, no, more, rose from the ground like air made sound. "Stop." The men froze. The lighter clattered from Gerald's fingers. Somewhere in the canopy, a branch cracked, tearing down and smashing between Gerald and the gas can like a warning written in wood. Maya didn't move her camera. "Keep talking," she whispered. "All of you." The earth shuddered under my shoes. Not violent, but deliberate. Rolling forward like a breath, dirt slumped away near Emily's marker, revealing the edge of something that caught moonlight strangely. Not wood, not stone. Iron. I dropped to my knees and clawed at the soil until my nails bled. A small iron box emerged, rusted but intact, banded and latched. Lila was beside me, tears streaking mud on her cheeks. "What is it?" Maya crouched close, recording. I pried the latch with the pry bar the second man had brought to do harm. The lid stuck, then cracked open on a smell like wet paper and iron. Inside lay bundles of brittle documents wrapped in oilcloth, birth and death registers, baptism cards, an old leather ledger with Mitchell pressed into the cover, and a stack of receipts clipped under a brass pin. The top receipt read like a blow, a donation to the Sheriff's Election Fund, dated 2 weeks after Barry's obituary. Beneath it, a payment ledger noting, "Sanctuary Maintenance" with Pastor Ellison's initials. Lila's hand flew to her mouth. They paid to erase them. Maya's breath hitched. "I have to copy this now." We heard sirens then, 2, maybe 3, winding up from town, fast and frantic. Clyde stepped from the trees as if the forest had shaped him, eyes shining like he'd found a miracle and a grave at once. "She left it where only someone who loved her would find it," he said, voice catching. "Josh must have buried the records after the old man died. He couldn't go to war. But he planted a time bomb." Holloway stared at the receipts like they bit. Gerald lunged for the box. "That's family property." I hugged it to my chest. "It's evidence," I said, and felt Emily at my shoulder like a small, steady hand. The sirens swung onto the lane. Red and blue began to strobe through the birches, painting the graves in urgent color. Maya zipped the ledger into her bag without asking. "If they seize your copy, they still won't have mine," she said. "Run it to my car. Go." Lila grabbed my elbow. We ran. Behind us, Holloway shouted orders he couldn't control. Gerald cursed God and ghosts, and the trees answered with a groan like a door closing. At the road, Maya dumped her camera in the back seat and thrust the passenger door open. "Get in. I'll file from the motel's Wi-Fi and mirror to 3 places. If they shut one down, the others live." Lila slid behind us, clutching the iron box. My phone buzzed. An unknown number, a Maryland area code. I answered out of reflex. "Mr. Winter's voice poured through, thin with urgency. "Mrs. Mitchell, Catherine, if you're at the farm, please listen. Your husband left a second envelope in my safe to be released only if you went north. It names people. It names dates. I should have given it to you sooner. I was afraid." Headlights flooded the mirror. A cruiser barreled up behind us, lights ramming the night. "Bring it," I said. "Tonight." He swallowed. "I'm on the road." The cruiser hit the brakes too late, fish-tailed, and came to rest in a spitting of gravel. Maya punched the gas. Behind us, the cemetery flickered like a constellation as every candle we'd left sparked to life. In the rear window, the birches stood tall. Sentinels, witnesses, refusing to bend. We didn't breathe until we hit the motel parking lot. Maya slid the car into a space under the flickering neon, killed the engine, and spun toward us, her face flushed with adrenaline. "We've got maybe 30 minutes before they regroup. I need to get this out now." She grabbed her bag, yanked her laptop open on the hood of the car, and tethered to her phone. Fingers flew over the keys. Each keystroke sounded like a hammer against the coffin lid of the Mitchell family's legacy. Lila and I stood close, the iron box heavy in her arms, both of us scanning the road for headlights. My phone buzzed again. "Mr. Winters." "I'm here," he said. I looked up to see his Lexus pulling into the lot, the man stepping out with a leather folder clutched tight to his chest. He looked older than I remembered, frail under the parking lot lights, but his eyes burned with urgency. "This is it," he said, pressing the folder into my hands. "Your husband knew the truth would outlive him. He left names, dates, even bank ledgers. I couldn't keep it anymore." My fingers shook as I opened it. Inside were typed pages, Joshua's neat annotations in the margins, arrows pointing to words like Emily, Caleb, and Anna. There were copies of birth records that had been struck from the official register, and letters from Joshua's mother, her handwriting frantic, begging him to keep quiet or they'll take you too. My vision blurred with tears. He had carried this burden alone all our marriage, thinking silence was protection. Maya's voice cut through. "Uploads live." She turned the laptop to us. On her site, the headline glared back, "The Mitchell Legacy, a cemetery of secrets." Beneath it, the first photos of the graves, the documents, the receipts, names spelled out for the world to see. "It's mirrored to 3 outlets," she added. "They can't kill it now." Lila's phone dinged. Notifications piling up fast. Retweets, shares, comments flooding in. Strangers typing the names of the children as if speaking them aloud gave them life again. My chest ached, but it wasn't grief. It was something brighter, sharper. The moment fractured with the roar of engines. 2 trucks swerved into the lot, followed by Holloway's cruiser. Doors slammed. Gerald climbed out first, his face twisted, eyes bloodshot. "You think you can shame us?" he roared. "You think strangers on the internet know better than blood?" He raised a crowbar, taking a step toward me. Then the lamps above us flickered. The neon sign buzzed, sputtered, then died. The night fell heavy and unnatural. A cold wind tore across the lot, whipping papers from the folder into the air. One fluttered down at Gerald's feet. An old photograph of Emily, smiling, her hair tied back with a ribbon. He froze, staring at it. The crowbar trembled in his grip. The sound came again. Children's voices, dozens, maybe more, weaving around us. Some whispered, some sang. Their chorus grew louder, stronger, until it filled the night like a storm. The truck's engine sputtered and died. Holloway cursed, slamming his door, but the radio inside his cruiser crackled with static. Then with a single, high-pitched laugh, Gerald dropped the crowbar, falling to his knees. "Stop," he whispered, clutching his head. "Please, stop." His voice cracked into sobs. The ground trembled, not enough to split, but enough to remind us the earth remembered. And then, for the first time, the voices hushed together, replaced by one clear child's voice, Emily's voice, carrying across the lot. Tell the truth. Maya never stopped filming. Her camera caught everything. The men dropping weapons, the sheriff frozen, the hum of a town's sins dragging into the open. Lila slipped her hand into mine, her grip strong. "We're not stopping, Mom," she whispered. "Not until they can never bury this again." I nodded, my tears burning hot. We've come too far. Behind us, the motel sign flickered back to life, its red glow painting the lot like a warning, or maybe like a promise. The town could no longer pretend. By sunrise, the story was everywhere. On TV tickers, news feeds, podcasts repeating Emily's name, Caleb's, Anna's, pictures of the cemetery, the crumbling headstones, the documents from the iron box spread like wildfire. Reporters began circling the farm, cameras flashing through the birches. Holloway barked at them. Gerald ranted. But the world had already seen too much. Lila and I returned to the cemetery with Maya, Mr. Winters, and a small crowd of townspeople who had come not in anger, but in something like shame. Mothers clutching children, old men removing their hats. For the first time, silence wasn't being used to cover the truth. It was a silence of listening. I stood before Emily's slate marker, my voice raw. These children were denied names, denied mourning, denied dignity. That ends today. I placed the folder on her grave, every document, every letter, every name written down by Joshua or hidden by fear. This is their record now. This is their testimony. The birches stirred though the air was still. The candles we had left flickered, their flames lifting tall and steady. And then, as if the earth itself had exhaled, the air softened, the weight lifted. A warmth spread across my shoulders, light as a hand, steady as love. Lila's breath caught. "Mom," her eyes filled with tears. "Do you feel it?" "She's lighter." I nodded, unable to speak. The voices that had haunted us for nights came once more, but not in anger, not in pain. A chorus, small and fragile, rose in unison, filling the cemetery like sunlight. Thank you. And then, they were gone. Not erased, not silenced, but free. I fell to my knees, sobbing, my tears wetting the earth. Lila knelt beside me, holding me tight. For the first time since Joshua's death, the hollow space inside me didn't ache with unanswered questions. It ached with something else, peace, and a terrible kind of love. The town would fight, Gerald would rage, Holloway might lose his badge, Ellison his pulpit. We might be hounded, shamed, dragged through mud, but the children had their names. Their graves were no longer secrets, and Joshua, my Joshua, could finally rest. As we left the cemetery, the birches stood tall in the morning light, no longer bending under the weight of silence. They were witnesses now, guardians. I glanced back one last time and whispered, "Sleep, Emily. Sleep. All of you." The wind carried the faintest echo, soft as a lullaby. "We're home."